Yeah, I mean, anything that's ever come up in the conspiracy world, whether it's Masons or Rockefellers or Rothschilds or Skull and Bones, or one of the people in this book is connected to it. One or more of the people in this book it's amazing how all of these names and themes just seem to pop up.
Hello, my name is Michael Parker, and welcome to Antidote, the show that introduces you to the people that you need to know and the stories you need to hear in the 21st century. Today we're speaking with Los Angeles-based author Dave McGowan. Dave, your book, Weird Seeds Inside the Canyon. Laurel Canyon, Covert Ops, and the Dark Heart of the Hippie Dream. The 1960s is possibly the most written about decade of all time. And yet you managed to find fertile ground discussing Laurel Canyon. Laurel Canyon is this magical place that I think the people who have heard of it probably have the same visions that I did growing up, reading Rolling Stone, rock stars and parties and actors and swimming pools. Yet you depict it on the cover as a wash in blood. So there were many revelations to me in this book, so let's start with the primary revelation, which was Lookout Mountain Laboratories. Tell us about that.
Lookout Mountain Laboratories was a top secret U.S. Air Force installation nestled up in Laurel Canyon, the existence of which remained unknown until fairly recently, even within the conspiracy community. Very few people seem to be aware of the existence of this facility, which remained operational at least through 1969 officially, and according to other sources, considerably beyond that, but certainly through 1969 during the peak years of the Laurel Canyon music scene, which was, a very curious discovery, to say the least, to find that nestled right in the middle of this bucolic hippie commune, so to speak, was a highly classified military establishment that was in full operation.
When was that built?
It was built World War II years, I believe, initially as a anti-aircraft installation to protect Los Angeles against a possible aerial attack during World War II, and then it morphed into a film studio. Some real heavyweights from Hollywood, performers like Marilyn Monroe, John Wayne, as you mentioned, I think Jimmy Stewart, and very heavyweight filmmakers, like I think John Ford and a couple others were involved. They had security clearance to work in this facility, and yet no one seems to know exactly what they did there, and they remained remarkably closed-lipped about it. I mean, pretty much all of them, as far as I know, went to their deaths without ever even mentioning the existence of this facility, let alone that they had any association with it. So it was a very well-kept secret for a very long time.
I've lived here for 20 years, 20 plus years. I had never heard of this, and now that I've seen it in your book, I think it's finally getting some play. I believe Jared Leto just bought the house for cool $5 million.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that was just in the paper not long ago.
This all looms over LA and the burgeoning entertainment scene, which takes us to the real point of the story, which is the rock and roll that came out of Laurel Canyon. And certainly the most famous or enigmatic figure to emerge from that scene would have to be Jim Morrison, the Lizard King, the lead singer of The Doors. But he also had a very conspicuous father. Tell us a little bit about Jim and his father and their place in that strange saga.
Yeah, Jim was certainly a larger-than-life figure, to this day, very, very iconic figure. The curious thing about him is that his father was actually a very high-ranking Navy admiral, which that part was known prior to my work on this book. But what I discovered, which had not been previously reported, is that not just was he a Navy admiral, but he just happened to be the Navy admiral who oversaw the Gulf of Tonkin incident. He was the commanding officer of the ships involved in that notorious incident, which of course led immediately to the passage of the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, and then to the full-scale involvement of ground troops in Vietnam, and ultimately the deaths of some 60,000 Americans and countless millions of Vietnamese and Laotian and Cambodian people, all of which was a direct result of this so-called Tonkin Gulf incident, which Jim Morrison's father was a key figure, to say the least, in orchestrating that whole incident that quickly resulted in the U.S. being engulfed in a very, very bloody quagmire over there. And that happened just like within a year or so of the sun emerging on the Laurel Canyon Sunset Strip scene as this larger-than-life icon of the anti-war, peace movement crowd. So there was a very curious juxtaposition there, to say the least, that you have the father sailing off to help choreograph this incident that drug America into this bloody quagmire, and then the son almost simultaneously emerging on the scene as this larger-than-life icon of the anti-war crowd. And never mentioning, of course, who his father was throughout his years of fame. He conspicuously avoided ever mentioning who his father was and what a key role he had played in.
And we can only guess as to why that was, but there's a picture in the book that shows Jim, the young Jim, the collegiate Jim, very clean-cut, preppy almost, with his father on the bridge of the what's the name of the ship?
Bonham Richard, I believe it was?
Bonham Richard, which was the ship in the Gulf of Tonkin incident.
Correct, yeah.
So it gets even weirder because you discuss the fact that Jim, and I've had other people who are big Doors fans kind of confirm this to me independently, Jim was not really a likely candidate to be a rock star, and he wasn't even a musician.
He had no musical background at all, by his own account. He had never had much interest in music, even as a fan. He said he'd only been to like one or two concerts, in his life. He didn't really listen to a lot of music. He'd never viewed himself as a singer, never learned to read or write music, never learned to play an instrument. Even after he achieved fame with the Doors, he never learned to read or write music or play an instrument. By his own account, he'd had no musical training and had never viewed himself as a musician or singer-songwriter. And as you say, not long before he emerged as this figure that we see here, was a very much different Jim Morrison, very clean-cut, collegiate, almost unrecognizable. Seeing his father off as he was about to leave, I think sailed out of San Diego for the Gulf of Tonkin, and within a year he had completely transformed himself physically and emerged as this rock star, just out of nowhere. Just an amazing physical transformation and an amazing transformation from someone who had expressed no interest in music whatsoever to just like overnight becoming this huge international star.
He was, the Doors, the whole scene that they emerged from, largely considered to be the leaders of an anti-war movement. Obviously, we know what happened with the Doors as they continued, but what blew me away, Dave, Jim died the same day his father gave a speech on the decommissioning of the ship that he was the rear admiral on during the Gulf of Tonkin.
Yeah, it was very strange.
That's really weird.
Very strange timing, to say the least.
It's almost like both of their missions were done.
Yeah, to some extent. Jim Morrison was just a fascinating guy. in a very short period of time, from like 1964 to 1971. There were like 3 separate Jim Morrisons, really. I mean, he just had a remarkable ability to reinvent himself, you know, from this clean-cut collegiate kid to this, you know, this Greek god rock star, and then in the later years to a very overweight, heavily bearded, reclusive poet. You know, and you look at pictures of Jim in these 3 eras, and which were very, you know, close together in time, and he looks like 3 completely different people. It's extraordinary, really, the capacity he had to reinvent himself, which is one thing that's given rise to various theories that he didn't actually die in Paris, but reinvented himself once again and went on under a new persona, which is not beyond the realm of possibility, but.
It's one of those things that I never gave too much thought to. I didn't buy it, but after having read your book, having spoken to other friends who are Doors devotees, who knows? Jim Morrison, amazing rock and roll performer. Let's move on, because there were so many bands that emerged out of the Laurel Canyon scene. And one of the things that we're going to find that is the primary premise of the book is almost all of these bands had within their family background military intelligence, some form of military ties, political ties. I'm going to name some of the bands out of Laurel Canyon because there's so many. The Byrds, the Doors, Buffalo Springfield, the Monkees, the Beach Boys, Steppenwolf, Love, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, the Turtles, the Mamas and the Papas, the Flying Burritos Brothers, the Eagles, America. There was the singer-songwriters, Jackson Browne, Joni Mitchell, James Taylor, Linda Ronstadt, Carole King. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's amazing how much talent poured out of such a tiny geographic area over such a very short period of time.
It's remarkable. One of the things I was going to ask you, just so people get a grasp of what we're talking about here, I'm going to ask you about a couple of people, and you tell me what their relationship was to these military backgrounds, because some of these people were, I couldn't believe it. Papa John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas.
He was the son of a career Marine Corps officer who also various other members of his family were very closely tied to the military as well. His mother, his older sister, and his first wife were all career Defense Department employees. So, I mean, pretty much his entire family, everyone around him was a career military person, and he himself was initially prepped for a military career. I believe he was a West Point appointee or Annapolis, one of the two. I get confused because so many of these people have such very similar backgrounds. So yeah, his entire family pretty much was from the military background, and not only that, but his first wife was also a direct descendant of John Adams, the second president of the United States, which is another thing that you will find is that some of these people, in addition to having a military or military intelligence background, a lot of them kind of come from what we could call like royal sort of blue blood bloodlines, so to speak. That's another commonality that a lot of these people share.